I always smile when I think of Bodhidharma. The delight of my heart is truly the light of my heart when I but think upon this 28th patriarch of Indian Buddhism. He is also the founder of the Zen school of Chinese and Japanese Buddhism. According to tradition, the origin of Zen actually goes back to Lord Gautama Buddha. Buddhist author Christmas Humphreys writes, "It is said that once, when the Buddha was seated with his bhikkhus, his monks, a Brahma Raja came to him and, offering him a golden flower, asked him to preach the Dharma. The enlightened one accepted the flower and, holding it aloft, gazed at it in silence. After a while, one of the monks, the Venerable Mahakashyapa, smiled. Such is the origin of Zen Buddhism. For it is said that this smile was handed down by 28 successive patriarchs, the last being the Indian philosopher Bodhidharma." One of the historians who chronicled Bodhidharma's life tells us this: "He was a man of wonderful intelligence, bright and far-reaching. He thoroughly understood everything that he had ever learned. As his ambition was to master the doctrine of the Mahayana, he abandoned the white dress of a layman and put on the robe of monkhood, wishing to cultivate the seeds of holiness." Cultivate the seeds of holiness. Take that teaching. If you desire holiness, cultivate the seeds. The seeds are the germs of truth, exalted thoughts and honor. Cultivate seeds of holiness. Dr. Thich Thien An, in his book Zen Philosophy, Zen Practice, says, "Bodhidharma came to China about 520 AD, 1,000 years after the time of Gautama Buddha. When he arrived, Buddhism was well established. There were many sincere Chinese Buddhists who understood the doctrine well, generously supported the religion, and cultivated the way with great energy. Nevertheless, something was lacking. Something was lacking. It was a void that Bodhidharma was to fill. What was lacking was the transmission of the mind of enlightenment." Studying Zen Buddhism is a path whereby we seek the transmission of the mind of enlightenment. We empty the vessel of the lower mind, we enter the divine mind, and we welcome the Buddha to our temple. Tradition says that Bodhidharma brought a special message from India to China, which encapsulates Zen philosophy. It reads, "A special transmission outside the scriptures. No dependence upon words and letters." These are the statements which encapsulate Zen philosophy. You should write them down. Number 1 is a special transmission outside the scriptures. 2 is no dependence upon words and letters. 3, direct pointing at the mind of man. 4, seeing into one's nature and the attainment of Buddhahood. Bodhidharma's message is that we cannot realize ultimate truth or attain our own Buddhahood by means of words and letters. No, we must discover for ourselves our real nature. And what is our real nature? It is the Buddha nature. Let's break through Bodhidharma's breakthrough sermon. It begins with a question by Bodhidharma's disciple, Hui Ku. Hui Ku asked, "If someone is determined to reach enlightenment, what is the most essential method he can practice?" Bodhidharma answered, The most essential method, which includes all other methods, is beholding the mind. Beholding the mind. Hui Ke asked, but how can one method include all others? Bodhidharma answered, the mind is the root from which all things grow. If you can understand the mind, everything else is included. It is like the root of a tree. All a tree's fruit and flowers, branches and leaves depend on its root. If you nourish its root, the tree multiplies. If you cut its root, it dies. Those who understand the mind reach enlightenment with minimal effort. Minimal effort. Those who do not understand the mind practice in vain. Everything good and bad comes from your own mind. To find something beyond the mind is impossible. You only are the circle of your own mind. The direction of the Great White Brotherhood to us to resolve our psychology is precisely the realization of the admonishment of Bodhidharma to behold the mind and study the mind. When a great bodhisattva delves deeply into perfect wisdom, he realizes that the activity of his mind has two aspects, the pure and the impure. We all know this. We all observe this. If we do not, we ought to do it. By their very nature, these two mental states are always present. They alternate as cause or effect depending on conditions. The pure mind delighting in good deeds, the impure mind thinking of evil. Those who are not affected by impurity are sages. That is the definition of a sage. Those who are not affected by impurity. It doesn't touch them. They may see it, but they do not take it in. They transcend suffering and experience the bliss of nirvana. All others trapped by the impure mind and entangled by their own karma are mortals. Thus we have a definition of the sage and the mortal trapped by the impure mind. He sees everything through his impure mind, so he holds all others in the regard of impurity. He is cynical. He believes that mankind are base. He cannot see beyond the wart on his own nose. They drift through 3 realms and suffer countless afflictions, all because their impure mind does what? It obscures their real self. The impure mind obscures the real self. So if you have the residue of an impure mind from parents, from teachers, from civilizations, from movies, from rock music, etc., and all of the ills and the burdens of the flesh, what you realize is that you really do not know your real self, because you see yourself as your impure self, obscuring that reality. Geshe Ben, an erudite 11th century monk, was known for his rigorous attention to the pure and the impure mind. Surya Das relates 2 incidents in the life of Geshe Ben. Wandering in search of alms one day, the young monk Ben was invited into the home of a devout couple. While the faithful householders went out of the room to prepare some food for the poor young mendicant, youthful Ben suddenly awoke as if from a reverie. He found himself, as it were, with his hand in the cookie jar, pinching some delectable tea for himself from a sack in the corner. There he was, caught red-handed, if only by his own meticulous conscience. Do you have a meticulous conscience? It is good to develop it. And so he shouted, "Thief! Thief!" Ben created such an uproar that the entire family came running, makeshift weapons in hand. To their amazement and relief, they beheld the novice accusing himself of pilfering and threatening to cut off his offending hand at once if it ever acted so disgracefully again. Thus the novice met his inner guru, the innate integrity of wisdom itself. Here, the guru integrity, the innate integrity of his own wisdom, was his inner guru, from whom he was never thereafter parted. Once in Geshe Ben's later years, many learned abbots and scholars were invited to pray and receive offerings at the home of a wealthy patron in southern Tibet. The first story is the early years, this is the later years. Geshe Ben was seated in the middle of the long row of monastic sages, all ranked according to seniority. In those days, it was the custom for tea, food, and other offerings to be handed individually to each of the seated lamas. Attendants proceeded along the line, starting from the oldest at the head and continuing to the youngest at the end. Geshe Ben noticed that the yogurt being doled out was of excellent quality, and he feared it might be gone by the time it reached him. Then he caught himself having such a grasping, unseemly thought, exclaiming, "Glutton! Foodaholic!" Ben immediately reached out, turned his wooden bowl upside down on the table before him. When the attendant monk carrying the clay yogurt pot reached Ben and asked him to right his overturned bowl, Ben refused. "My greedy mind has already enjoyed its share," Ben explained. In this way, practitioners like Geshe Ben vigilantly guard every thought, word, and deed, incorporating all activities into the spiritual path. It is very good to hear these accounts, for by them we begin to internalize the disciplines of which those devotees of the East, the Far East, are capable, the way they think and their dedication. Above all, we hear the youngness of the mind. Geshe Ben considered his thoughts to be concrete things, not as we would dismiss them as just passing thoughts. Every thought he analyzed to determine that he was not in the lower three realms. The next teaching of Bodhidharma is on the 6 perfections, or paramitas. These are the virtues everyone who aspires to be a bodhisattva, which is a Buddha to be, must perfect. So here they are. Write them down. I have used the translation of J.C. Cleary from his book Zen Dawn, as well as that of Red Pine. In this section, Bodhidharma correlates the 6 perfections to the 6 senses. Hui Ke asked, as the scriptures explain them, the 6 paramitas, also called the 6 perfections, are, write them down and number them. 1, giving, the perfection of perfect giving. 2, discipline, the perfection of self-discipline, perfect self-discipline. 3, the perfection of patience, perfect patience. 4, the perfection of energetic progress, energetic progress. 5, meditative concentration, the perfection of meditative concentration. 6, wisdom. Wisdom. If you have wisdom, you know you have wise dominion over yourself. So this is Hui Ke speaking to Bodhidharma. You say that if these 6 sense faculties are pure, this is called 6 perfections. If we understand it this way, what is the meaning of perfection, and why are they called fairies? F-E-R-R-I-E-S, fairies. A ferry is a boat that carries you and automobiles and trucks over waterways. Bodhidharma said, if you want to cultivate the 6 perfections, you should always be purifying the 6 sense faculties. The logic is, if you purify the 6 sense faculties, then you will manifest the 6 perfections. If you purify these faculties, then what you manifest of the perfections will also be pure, because you receive and send out the perfections through the sense faculties. Then Bodhidharma says, first you must subdue the 6 thieves. Thieves. You have 6 thieves within your own aura. If you can abandon the I thief, E-Y-E, the I thief, and leave behind the objects of form, the mind will be free from stinginess. The point here is, what you cannot see, you cannot covet. When you see things and covet them and hold them close to yourself, then you are guilty of stinginess. This is called the perfection of giving. The perfection of giving comes when you cast out the I thief. Leave behind the objects of form, the mind will be free from stinginess. 2, if you can control the ear thief and not let it indulge in the dusts of sounds, this is called upholding discipline. The ear thief robs you of entering into the higher dimensions of being. You let the ear take from you what you should be hearing out of the mind of God. So this is the ear thief. The third is the nose thief. If you can subdue the nose thief by equating all smells as neutral, this is called the perfection of patience. All the things that you can smell, both good and bad, may draw you, for instance, to eat food because it smells so good, and to do all kinds of things because by the nose thief, you are attracted to what you are taking in through the nose. Without allowing the nose to affect one's thinking, one develops the perfection of patience, because you are not pulled here and there by this sense. And so you are patiently centered within, and so you have a higher soul faculty. These physical faculties correspond to soul faculties and ultimately to spiritual faculties. So patience comes when we are not pulled here and there by this sense. Next, if you can curb the tongue thief by conquering desires to taste, to praise, and to explain tirelessly, this is called the perfection of energetic progress, or virya. Virya. The tongue thief robs you of the power of the throat chakra. Also, the desires to taste. So we eat because something tastes good instead of eating what is good for us. Then to praise, continually offering praise and so forth upon people, and then talking tirelessly, explaining oneself. Energetic progress, when you control the tongue, you control the sacred fire of the first ray, the throat chakra. This is the initiation of second level, the throat chakra. So then you have your virya, then you have the concentrated energy, the power within you to do things because you are not the slave of the tongue thief. If you can subdue the body thief, this is the next one, the body thief, by remaining unmoved by sensations of touch and desires, this is called the perfection of meditative concentration. Meditative concentration. The 60s, the 70s, and continuing have brought into our culture the touchy, feely, graspy, continually having contact one with the other. I was reminded of this when I was having my rosary on this week, wherein Jesus said of the woman who thought she could be healed if she would just touch his garment, did so, and Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" And his disciples said, "Master, the crowd throngs thee, and thou sayest, 'Who touched me?'" And Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I perceive that virtue is gone out of me." That virtue is the virya. That virtue is the sacred fire and the building in your aura of tremendous strength and energy, whereby you can ultimately become a magnet for the Holy Spirit. Jesus was concerned to keep the aura about him intact. Nevertheless, the woman was healed, and he had compassion on her, an issue of blood of 12 years. So please remember this, that as you have studied hard, worked hard, decreed hard, changed your momentums, reversed the spirals of negativity and downward flow of energies all through this summer, do not allow yourself to lose that energy by thinking that you need to have continual touching with those who have not been here, with those who are simply in the world, even those who you love. Of course, it is awkward not to be loving and kind toward one's dearest friends, family members, and so forth. But you can always call for your tube of light to Archangel Michael for the protection and sealing of your chakras, that when you are in obvious social situations where it is necessary to touch one another, to shake hands, to do this and that you will remember to guard well what you have garnered in your chakras. It is easy to lose. This is why we are concluding with these lectures, so that you can take with you the sense of what the discipline is of the masters of the Far East and what they expect of their disciples. If you can subdue the body thief by remaining unmoved by sensations of touch and desires, this is called the perfection of meditative concentration. When you have not subdued the body thief, and he comes to rob you of the one-pointed raising of the sacred fire, what you find is that Being vulnerable to sensations of touch distracts you from meditative concentration. And that is what the sense of touch and desire brings about. Next comes the thief of the mind thief. If you can tame the mind thief by not yielding to delusions, but practicing wakefulness, this is called the perfection of wisdom. Wakefulness is alertness. You do not have to do as Bodhidharma did, cut off your eyelids and be there night and day. He was illustrating something to his disciples: wakefulness, being alert 24 hours a day. You can be alert when you are sleeping. If you are alert when you are sleeping, you suddenly awaken to danger, to noise, to sound, to smoke. You are alert because you have trained yourself to be alert. Those who are not alert and who eat heavy foods and who sleep deeply in the flesh are often burned alive in fires because they do not have the alertness developed of the wakefulness of the mind of the Buddha that is going 24 hours a day. Paramita means crossing. These 6 paramitas are transports. Like boats or rafts, they transport beings to the other shore. Hence they are called ferries. When I was a very little girl and my mother told me we were going on a ferry and didn't explain what it was, I really thought when I was about 3 years old that we were going to climb on a ferry who was going to fly us over the water. I was very disappointed when I saw the boat. Bodhidharma now takes up the question of whether meritorious works will help you attain Buddhahood. This is a very subtle teaching because you can almost think that it's in line with Martin Luther, who says that faith is all you need. You don't need works. But it has a deeper meaning. Hui Ke asked, throughout the sutras, the Buddha tells mortals they can achieve enlightenment by performing meritorious works. Among these are observing fasts and worshiping. But if beholding the mind includes all other practices, then such works as these would appear redundant. Bodhidharma answered, the sutras of the Buddha contain countless metaphors. Because mortals have shallow minds and do not understand anything deep, the Buddha used the tangible to represent the sublime. The tangible to represent the sublime. So be certain that when you are reading these texts that you know when an example is an example made concrete for our understanding, but in fact is not intended to be taken literally. People who seek blessings by concentrating on external works instead of internal cultivation are attempting the impossible. If you seek blessings by external works instead of internal cultivation, you are attempting the impossible. By cultivating the inner Buddha, one's works are then worthy of merit, for they are accomplished by the Buddha nature. This is a profound teaching. If you are empty, if you have not developed the Buddha nature, if the root of the Buddha is not pushing up the flowers and the leaves, if you have not internalized the Buddha nature, then the good works you are doing are not coming forth from the Buddha nature. Therefore, you do not receive the merit of having done them through the Buddha nature. Nevertheless, until you realize the Buddha nature, it is well to do good works. It is better to do good works when You channel into those works profound love for the Buddha nature in yourself and in another, and profound love for that Buddha nature that is increasing.
You're watching Elizabeth Clare Prophet, world-renowned author and founder of Summit University. Summit University is located at the beautiful Royal Teton Ranch in Park County, Montana, just north of Yellowstone National Park. If you'd like more information, call 1-800-245-5445. That's 1-800-245-5445.
Bodhidharma says, observing a fast is useless unless you understand what this really means. This teaching on fasting is the most enlightening I have ever read. Those of you who fast, listen carefully. To fast means to regulate your body and mind so that they are not distracted or disturbed. Now that is the principal reason for fasting, unless you are fasting purely for health reasons. But once you hear this teaching, you will incorporate your fasting for health reasons into the disciplines the Buddha outlines. So this is Bodhidharma. To fast means to regulate your body and mind so that they are not distracted or disturbed. And to observe means to uphold the rules of discipline according to the Dharma. Fasting means guarding against the 6 attractions on the outside, the attractions to which the 6 senses become attached. Guarding against the 6 attractions on the outside. Fasting means guarding against the 3 poisons on the inside. Greed, anger, delusion. Fasting means striving through contemplation to purify your body and mind. Fasting also includes 5 kinds of food. This is what you get to eat on your fast. 1, first there is delight in the Dharma. So you eat the delight in the Dharma. This is the delight that comes from acting in accordance with the Dharma. 2, the second kind of food is harmony in meditation. This is the harmony of body and mind that comes from seeing through subject and object. Seeing through subject and object. You must have harmony in meditation while fasting. If you do not do all these things that Bodhidharma lists, you fast in vain. The third kind of food is invocation, the invocation of Buddhas with both your mouth and your mind. We have good adeptship on giving invocations with the mouth. We can learn lessons of concentration to have invocations of the mind. The fourth food you eat while fasting is resolution. The resolution to pursue virtue, whether walking, standing, sitting, or lying down. Virtue is an essential part of fasting. Resolution brings the determination to embody that virtue. The fifth food while fasting is liberation, the liberation of your mind from worldly contamination. You don't fast and then tune in to all the degrading manifestations in movies, in television, and so forth. These 5 are the foods of fasting. Unless a person eats these 5 pure foods, he is wrong to think he is fasting. This is Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma in our midst. Also, Once you stop eating the food of delusion, if you touch it again, you break your fast. And once you break it, you reap no blessing from it. The world is full of deluded people who do not see this. They indulge their body and mind in all manner of evil. They give free rein to their passions and have no shame. And when they stop eating ordinary food, they call it fasting. How absurd, says Bodhidharma. The absurdity of observing only the external ritual of fasting was pointed out in this anecdote by Zhuangzi. The gatekeeper in the capital city of Sung became such an expert mourner after his father's death. He so emaciated himself with fasts and austerities that he was promoted to high rank in order that he might serve as a model of ritual observance. As a result of this, his imitators so deprived themselves that half of them died. The others were not promoted. This is a very dry account. It comes in a very timely moment if you've been watching the news and hearing the talk about young girls, even at an early age, starving themselves so that they can look super thin. And it is an obsession. We've heard about it for years, but it is coming to the fore now because someone who was a great athlete actually starved herself to death, did not allow herself to pass into puberty, and died because of the malfunction of her organs. And when she was in the hospital, she took the IV off and threw it in the garbage can. So this is the fanaticism, the wrong side, the evil side, the entity-ridden side of fasting. We need to be aware of it because many demons move us to this point, or would move us to this point. Some people are addicted to fasting on the spiritual path. Bodhidharma does not recommend it except under the terms that he has stated. And the wonderful thing about this teaching on fasting is to realize that these monks under Bodhidharma and Buddhists in all ages have recognized that the least important fast is the fast of the physical body. The most important fast is the fasting of the six senses. This is something we must profoundly look at and rejoice in fasting within these disciplines. Bodhidharma explains that worshiping without cultivating the inner meaning is also fruitless. This, of course, we see often in the religions of the West, rote religions, where people, even the leaders of churches, do not know the meanings of their own doctrine, their own dogma, and cannot explain it. Bodhidharma says, worship means reverence and humility. It means revering your real self and humbling delusions. Be humble and reduce the level of your delusions. If you can wipe out evil desires and harbor good thoughts, even if nothing shows, it is worship. Such form is its real form. The Lord wanted worldly people to think of worship as expressing humility and subduing the mind, replacing one's self-delusions with the spirit of humility. So he told them to prostrate their bodies, to show their reverence, to let the external express the internal, to harmonize essence and form. This is the teaching of Gautama Buddha. We perform outer rituals because it reminds us of the internal. Those who fail to cultivate the inner meaning and concentrate instead on the outward expression never stop indulging in ignorance, hatred, and evil, while exhausting themselves to no avail. They can deceive others with postures, remain shameless before sages, and vain before mortals, but they will never escape the wheel, much less achieve any merit. The wheel of rebirth. There is an old Buddhist tale about a Lama who realized the real meaning of worship, rather than just concentrating on the external expression of his spiritual practice. Surya Das writes, "An old Lama liked to sit in meditation on a large flat rock overlooking a placid pool. Yet every time he began his prayers and devotions in earnest, just as soon as he had crossed his legs and settled down, he would spot an insect struggling helplessly in the water. Time after time he would lift up his creaky old body and deliver the tiny creature to safety before settling down again on his rocky seat. So his contemplations went day after day. His brother monks were dedicated meditators who also went off daily to sit alone in the rocky ravines and caves of that desolate region. Eventually they became aware that the old Lama hardly ever managed to sit still, but actually spent most of his meditation sessions plucking insects out of the tiny pool." This is an Eastern story that not all of us can understand. It certainly seemed fitting to save the life of a helpless sentient being of any kind, large or small. But some of the monks occasionally wondered if the old Lama's meditations might not be greatly furthered if he sat undisturbed elsewhere, away from such distractions. One day they finally mentioned their concern to him. One monk asked the old man, "Wouldn't it be more beneficial to sit elsewhere and meditate deeply, undisturbed all day? That way you would more swiftly gain perfect enlightenment, and then you could be free, to free all living beings from the ocean of conditioned existence." Another brother suggested, "Perhaps you could just meditate by the pool with your eyes closed." A young scholarly monk, emboldened by the more tactful queries of his senior brethren, demanded, "How can you develop perfect tranquility and deep, diamond-like concentration if you keep getting up and sitting down 100 times in each meditation session?" And so it went. The venerable old Lama listened attentively, saying nothing. When all had their say, he bowed gratefully and said, "I'm sure my meditations would be deeper and more fruitful if I sat unmoved all day, brothers, as you say. But how can an old worthless one like myself, who has vowed again and again to give this lifetime and all his lives to serving and liberating others, just sit with closed eyes and hardened heart? How can I pray and intone the altruistic mantra of great compassion while right before my very eyes helpless creatures are drowning?" To that simple, humble question, none of the assembled monks could find an answer. That is the end of that story. Next, Bodhidharma's disciple asks about the practice some Buddhists have of invoking Amitabha in order to be reborn in his Western paradise. So you see, Bodhidharma condones the seeking and calling upon the Buddhas to be their teachers. Red Pine explains that the Western paradise, also called the Pure Land, is presided over by Amitabha, one of the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, and the one who is associated with the West, Amitabha. Red Pine says, "Wholehearted invocation of Amitabha assures the devotee of rebirth in his Pure Land, which is described as millions of miles away and not very far at all. Once reborn there, devotees have little trouble understanding the Dharma and attaining liberation." Bodhidharma's teaching begins with Wei Ke asking, "The sutras say that someone who wholeheartedly invokes the Buddha is sure to be reborn in the Western paradise. Since this door leads to Buddhahood, why seek liberation in beholding the mind?" Bodhidharma answered, if you are going to invoke the Buddha, you have to do it right. Unless you understand what invoking means, you will do it wrong. And if you do it wrong, you will never go anywhere. Buddha means awareness, the awareness of body and mind that prevents evil from arising in either. Now that is a very good definition of your Buddhahood. Buddha means awareness, the awareness of body and mind that prevents evil from arising in either. And to invoke means to call to mind, to call constantly to mind the rules of discipline and to follow them with all your might. To invoke means to call to mind the rules of discipline and follow them with all your might. That is what is meant by invoking. Invoking has to do with thought and not with language. We know that we must do this both in the mind and in the spoken word. Then Bodhidharma says, if you use a trap to catch fish, once you succeed, you can forget the trap. And if you use language to find meaning, once you find it, you can forget language. To invoke the Buddha's name, you have to understand the Dharma of invoking. The Dharma of invoking. If it is not present in your mind, your mouth chants an empty name. As long as you are troubled by the three poisons or by thoughts of yourself, your deluded mind will keep you from seeing the Buddha, and you will only waste your effort. Chanting and invoking are worlds apart. Chanting is done with the mouth, invoking is done with the mind. And because invoking comes from the mind, it is called the door to awareness. By invoking God, you open the door of the mind to the awareness of God. I'm going to now give you a Tibetan story about the fifth Dalai Lama, who tells of the importance of invoking with the mind and not simply chanting with the mouth. I want to tell you that invoking with the mind must always be accompanied by the visualization of a thought form of that which you desire to draw down from the Buddha. So there's no opportunity to fail to concentrate. You must concentrate, and you must fill in with absolute concentration that which you are invoking from God, the Godhead itself, and that which you are drawing down, pulling into this world so that life streams of lesser evolution may benefit from your invoking. This is a discipline that you can do if your mind is slightly more yang than yin. If the mind gets too yin, you can't even remember that you're creating a thought form while you're giving an invocation. So master the mind, be diligent in this. This story about the fifth Dalai Lama is taken from the book Tibet by Colin Turnbull and Thubten Jigane Norbu. Once as he was looking down from his palace, the Potala, the fifth Dalai Lama, saw an old man making his circuit of the sacred city. The man was followed by the figure of a woman, whom he instantly recognized as Dolma, or Tara, the heavenly consort of Avalokiteshvara. Every day at the same time the old man appeared on his pilgrimage, and every day he was followed by the image of Dolma. The Dalai Lama asked for the old man to be brought to him, and then questioned him. The man knew nothing of Dolma following him, and abused the court by his ignorance and apparent stupidity. He was merely making the prescribed pilgrimage, he said, and reciting the holy prayer as he had been taught. When he recited the prayer, he was ridiculed for the number of mistakes he had made, and he was carefully taught how to recite it correctly. The next day, the Dalai Lama watched from the roof of the Potala with members of his court, but when the old man appeared as usual, he was alone. There was no sign of the goddess Dolma. Once more, the Dalai Lama had the old man brought to him. There, in front of everyone, he told the old man that he was more fortunate than those who had presumed to try to correct him for his faulty recitation. For in his ignorance he nevertheless had the protection of Dolma, whereas in his newfound learning he had lost it. He told the old man to return to his pilgrimage and to continue as he had begun, with his mind and heart fixed on their purpose. For it was devotion and not learning that brought such blessings. The Dolma followed the old man because he had the perfect thought form in his mind of the prayer he was saying. And so the Dolma could step through that thought form and manifest with him. The old man did as he was told. Once again he was seen making his round of the city, mumbling his faulty prayer. And once again Dolma was there, following and protecting him. Bodhidharma continues his discourse. If you cling to appearances while searching for meaning, you won't find a thing. Thus sages of the past cultivated introspection and not speech. Zhuangzi gives the same teaching. He says, the purpose of a fish trap is to catch fish, and when the fish are caught, the trap is forgotten. The purpose of a rabbit snare is to catch rabbits. When the rabbits are caught, the snare is forgotten. The purpose of words is to convey ideas. When the ideas are grasped, the words are forgotten. Where can I find a man who has forgotten words? He is the one I would like to talk to. Bodhidharma concludes his sermon with these words. The people I meet nowadays are superficial. They think of merit as something that has form. They squander their wealth and butcher creatures of land and sea. They foolishly concern themselves with erecting statues and stupas, telling people to pile up lumber and bricks, to paint this blue and that green. They strain body and mind, injure themselves, and mislead others. And they do not know enough to be ashamed. How will they ever become enlightened? They see something tangible and instantly become attached. If you talk to them about formlessness, they sit there dumb and confused. Greedy for the small mercies of this world, they remain blind to the great suffering to come. Such disciples wear themselves out in vain, turning from the true to the false. They talk about nothing but future blessings. If you can simply concentrate your mind's inner light and behold its outer illumination, you will dispel the three poisons, greed, anger, delusion, and drive away the 6 thieves once and for all. And without effort, you will gain possession of an infinite number of virtues, perfections, and doors to the truth. Seeing through the mundane and witnessing the sublime is less than an eye blink away. Realization is now. Why worry about gray hair? But the true door is hidden and cannot be revealed. I have only touched upon beholding the mind. That is the end of the quote by Bodhidharma, in which we hear his profound humility. And this is the end of the lecture.
For more information on Elizabeth Clare Prophet's prophetic vision and spiritual solutions, call 1-800-245-5445. The preceding program was presented by Summit University, Box 5000, Livingston, Montana, 59047 5000. If you'd like to know more, call this number or write this address. For a free book by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, or for more information about her teachings on the world's major religions, call 1-800-245-5445.